Or start the paper Feb March 2026, paper 6 variant 2. It could be important for your upcoming exam. All right. So we will start from question number 1. In question number 1, they are saying that diagram shows a stone of irregular shape. Which property of the stone can be found by lowering it into a measuring cylinder half filled with water? So basically, measuring cylinder is an instrument which is used to measure the volume of any irregular object. All right, so you can see initially we have filled the measuring cylinder. Measuring cylinder is filled half with water. When we will lower this stone in this measuring cylinder, so the water level will rise up. All right, and we can measure the volume of this irregular stone by subtracting the final volume and initial volume. Initial volume of water is V1 and final volume of water is V2. So basically, measuring cylinder is used to find the volume of an irregular object. So it means, students, C is the correct answer. All right, I'm repeating, students. C is the correct answer. Is it clear to you, everyone? All right. Now, students, look at the question number 2. In question number 2, they are saying a helium balloon is tapped into a top pen balance. A metal block of mass 100 gram is placed on a balance. The reading on the balance is 91 grams. So you can see balance is used to measure the mass of any object, and the reading on the balance is 91 gram. Two objects are on the balance. One is metal block whose weight is lying in the downward direction, and metal block mass is given 100 gram. All right. Helium balloon. Helium is a lighter gas. It will act in the upward direction. Now they are saying which statement can be deduced from this experiment. So what we can deduce from this experiment? In option A, they are saying the balloon exerts a downward force of 0.09 Newton on the top pen balance. So A cannot be a right answer, student, because we can see the balloon is moving in the upward direction. So it will exert the upward force rather than the downward force. Now in the B part, they are saying the helium has a mass of minus 9 gram. So basically, student, mass can never be negative because mass is a scalar quantity and scalar has no particular direction. So mass can never be negative. So B cannot be a right answer. Now they are saying the helium has a mass of plus 9 grams. So obviously we cannot calculate the mass of the helium by simply subtracting both of them. And mass, with the mass we can never associate positive and negative sign. So it means C cannot be a right answer. Now in option D, they are saying the resultant downward force. Resultant force means like the metal block weight is acting in the downward direction and balloon force is acting in the upward direction. So if I will find the resultant force, so the resultant is acting in the downward direction and the force is 0.89 Newton. So how we can find the resultant force, students? Force means total weight. And how we can calculate the weight here, students? We will use the formula W is equals to mg. All right. We will use the formula W is equals to mg. So total mass on the pen balance is given 91 gram. So I'm writing here student mass is given 91 gram. So first of all, we have to convert it into kg. What is the reason behind this? The reason is that the gravity value we usually take 9.8 Newton per kg. So it means, students, if we are taking in Newton or per kg, so we have to take the mass in kilogram. So how we can convert the mass into kilogram? By dividing it with 1000. 91 divided by 1000, we will get the total mass. So now student W is equals to mg. We will use this formula to calculate the resultant force which is acting on this top pen balance. All right. So now the mass is basically 91 divided by 1000 and gravity value is 9.8. So now we will multiply both of them to get the answer. 91 divided by 1000, then multiply it by 9.8. So what we are getting, students, we are getting the resultant weight or resultant force on this top pen balance, that is 0.89 Newton. So it means, students, D is the correct answer. All right. Did you understand this question, students? D is the correct answer. Is it clear to you, everyone? Okay, I hope you all have noted down this calculation. I'm moving towards the next question, that is question number 3. This question is very interesting and easy. In this question, they are saying an athlete runs 300-meter up a hill in 100 seconds. So now, students, suppose that let me draw the hill here. This is a hill, and athlete is running in the upward direction, and the distance is 300-meter. An athlete will take 100-second time to run on this hill. Now she then runs down the same hill in 50 seconds. So now the athlete is speed up basically. So initially when the athlete was moving in the upward direction, she is covering a distance of 300-meter in 100 seconds. Now if she is moving back, and but when she is moving back, she is covering the same distance, but now she is taking the time 50 seconds. So we have to calculate the average speed. So what is the formula of average speed, students? Average speed formula is total distance divided by total time. So this is the formula of average speed. All right, I'm repeating, student, total distance divided by total time. So basically, athlete is moving in the upward direction, and then she is running down the same hill. So she is moving twice on the same hill. Well done, students. So it means 300-meter plus 300-meter. So she is covering the total distance of 600-meter. So now, students, you can see the athlete is running up in 100 seconds, and now she is running down in 50 seconds. So total time is 100 plus 50 will become 150. So total distance is 600. Total time is 150. So basically, students, 600 divided by 150. So what we are getting? We are getting the average speed 4 meter per second. So average speed is 4 meter per second, students. So it means B is the correct answer. Did you understand this question, everyone? Remember, beta, to calculate average speed, we will always take total distance divided by total time. Now I am going to clear the screen and moving towards the next question. Question number 4. In question number 4, they are saying the diagram shows the speed time graph of a car. All right, students, so you can see this is the speed time graph of a car. What is the acceleration of the car? So basically, students, acceleration we can determine by gradient of speed time graph. I'm repeating, students, acceleration we can determine by gradient of speed time graph. And to find the gradient, we need 2 points. So now you can see this is a straight line. So straight line will have a constant gradient, but we can take the values at initial point, which is 4 meter per second, or at final point, that is 12 meter per second. So now you can see when the time is 0, so the initial speed of a car is 4 meter per second. All right, so now you can see, students, x1 value is 0. All right, so I'm using the gradient formula, and in gradient, we have to use this formula y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. So x1 is the initial value, which is 0 second, and y1 is 4 seconds. Now x2 is 2 seconds, and y2 is 12 meter per second. So we will simply put the values in the formula, simplify it, and we will get the answer. All right, so y2 is 12 minus y1 is 4, then 2 minus 0. So 12 minus 4, we will get 8. All right, divided by 2. So the gradient, or we can say acceleration, is 4 meter per second square. All right, student, acceleration is 4 meter per second square. So A is the correct answer. Well done, students. Is it clear to you, everyone? Okay, now I'm moving towards the next question, question number 5. In question number 5, they are saying what is weight? So weight is basically acting on the object due to the gravitational pull-up effect of Earth. So weight is not a frictional force. Obviously, friction is a force which will act in the opposite direction when the object is moving. Like if the object is moving in forward direction, so the friction force will act in the backward direction. So it's a type of resistive force. So A cannot be a right answer. So now they are saying it's a magnetic force. So obviously weight is not a magnetic force. So what about the option C, students? Weight is a gravitational force. Weight depend upon gravity. All right, student, if the value of gravity will change, so the weight will change. So it means the student C is the correct answer, that weight is a gravitational force. All right. Now, look at the question number 6. What is the relationship between the force F on an object, its mass m, and acceleration? So, it's a very easy question, students, and you can identify they are talking about the Newton's second law of motion. All right. Newton's second law of motion is resultant force is equals to ma. Resultant force is equals to ma. But in these options, you cannot find F is equals to ma. So it means we have to check whether which variable they are making independent is correct or not. So in option A, they are saying A is equals to M upon F. So if I will make A independent, so we have to move the M on the left side. So F divided by M is equals to A, means option A cannot be a right answer. And obviously students, B also cannot be a right answer, because in option B they are saying A is equals to F into M. But here we can see A is equals to F upon M. So A or B cannot be a right answer. Now look at the option C. In option C they are saying they are making M independent. So M, if I will make the M independent here, so I have to move the A on the left side. So F upon A is equals to M. So it means, students, yes, C is the correct option. All right, that the mass is equals to resultant force divided by acceleration. Achha, let me tell you one thing here, student. This is not a single force. This formula is not for a single force. This formula is basically for resultant force. Like for example, this is the vehicle which is moving in the forward direction with a driving force of 40 Newton. This is the driving force. And a backward force is acting, this is a backward force which is acting on this vehicle, that is 20 Newton. So if I ask you to find the resultant force, so resultant force is equals to 40 minus 20. So resultant force is acting on this vehicle is 20 Newton. So this one is the resultant force, and this formula is only derived for our resultant force. Is it clear to you, students? All right, well done, everyone. Now, students, I'm moving towards the question number 7. In question number 7, they are saying which statement about the resultant force acting on a moving object must be correct. So, dekhiye beta, I told you the formula of resultant force, which is ma. But in these options, they are saying it is a change in momentum of the object per unit time. It is a force needed to keep the object moving at constant speed. So if the object is moving with constant speed, so it means acceleration is zero. Or if the acceleration is zero, so it means that the resultant force is zero. So obviously B cannot be a right answer. All right, because force and acceleration are directly proportional to each other. So if object is moving with constant speed, so it means acceleration is zero. In option C, they are saying it is the impulse acting on the object to keep the object moving. So impulse is basically change in momentum. Change in momentum. So it's not the impulse that will keep the object moving. So C cannot be a right answer. In option D, they are saying it is the largest forward force acting on the object. So obviously, beta, resultant force can never be the only forward force. It can be backward force as well. So D cannot be a right answer. So in option A, they are saying it is change in momentum of the object per unit time. So yes, students, this is the correct answer, because force formula is delta P upon T. And these two formulas are same, students, because delta P means change in momentum, and change in momentum is equals to mv minus u. So when I will put the formula here, so mv minus u upon t, and we know that, students, that v minus u upon t is the formula of acceleration. So instead of this one, I can put the acceleration here. So now, students, we are getting the formula F is equals to ma. So yes, option A is the correct answer. So force is equals to rate of change of momentum, or momentum of the object per unit time. Is it clear to you, everyone? All right. Now I'm moving towards the next question. Next question is question number 8. In question number 8, they are saying a motor is used to lift different sized loads through the same vertical height. Alright, so what the motor is doing? Motor is lifting different size of weight at a certain height. The power input to the motor is kept constant. So now, student, this is the motor, and motor is lifting the object at a certain height. At the input power, this is the input power of motor. This is motor, student. This is the input power of motor, which is kept constant. So it means we are not changing the input power. But at the output, motor is lifting the heavy object or object of different load at a certain height. All right. Now they are saying which statement about the efficiency of the motor is correct. So they have given us the graph. In the graph, you can see on x-axis, they are taking the load lifted per Newton. So it means obviously we are considering the relation between the different load. Obviously, the load will have the different values versus the time taking. So as you can see, as the load value is increasing, the time taken by the motor to lift the object at a certain height is also increasing. So it means for the greater load, time will be greater. For less load, motor will take less time to uplift the object at the same vertical height. Like this height, if I will fix it, so motor is lifting the object at this height. All right. So now, student, they are asking about the efficiency of the motor is correct. So what is the formula of efficiency? Efficiency formula is useful output power divided by input power multiplied by 100. So basically the input power is kept constant. All right. So what is output power? Output power means energy upon time. Output power formula is energy upon time. So it means now the efficiency will become energy upon time divided by input power multiplied by 100. So it means that efficiency and time are inversely related with each other. All right, because input power is kept constant, so we will not consider this value, okay, this variable. So it means that efficiency and time are inversely related with each other. If the time of lifting the object is increasing, so it means that efficiency of the motor will decrease. And now you can see from the graph, student, that when the time is greater, so the load is also greater. Obviously, the motor will take greater time to uplift the heavy object as compared to the smaller object. So it means that as the load value will increase, if the load will become greater, so the time will become also greater. So the efficiency of motor will decrease. So now you can see which statement about the efficiency of motor is correct. So it decreases as the load increases. So yes, student, this one is the correct option, that as the load will increase, so motor will take greater time, so efficiency will decrease. Is it clear to you, students? All right. So now I'm moving towards the next question. Next question is question number 9. In question number 9, they are saying an object is at a depth h below the surface of a liquid. So now, students, suppose that this is the liquid and this is the object which is placed at a certain depth. All right. And this depth is represented by the letter h. The density of the liquid is represented by the letter rho. Rho is a Greek letter which is representing the density, and the gravity value is G. What is the total liquid pressure at depth H? So basically, pressure of liquid formula is rho GH. Rho is density of the liquid, G is gravity, and H is depth of the liquid. So pressure formula is rho GH. So you can see option D is the correct answer. That total pressure of the liquid at depth H depends upon high H, density, and gravity. All right, so this question was very easy. Question number 9. Okay. Now I'm moving towards the next question, that is question number 10. This paper is Feb March 2026. You can see it is mentioned already in the header, Feb March 2026, paper 6, variant 2. All right, recent paper. Question number 10. In question number 10, they are saying a car tire run over a nail that makes a hole in it. So you can see this is a hole or puncture in the tire. All right, and the air is leaking out from the tire. Why does the air leave the tire? देखिए बेटा, if the air is leaving, so it means that the air is moving from the inner part to the outer part. So it means that the air is moving from the inside of the tire to the outside. It is only possible, like for example, in diffusion process, that the molecules which are at higher concentration, they will always move to the lower concentration. Similarly, students, inside the tire, if I talk about inside the tire, air particles are moving in the random direction, all right, and their pressure is higher. All right, their pressure is greater, and outside the tire there is atmospheric pressure. All right, but if the air is moving outside as it is mentioned in the diagram, so it means that from this hole the air particles are moving at outside. So it means that the inner pressure is greater and outer pressure is lower. So that's why the air particles are moving from inside to outside, because of the pressure difference. All right. So it means, student, in option A, let me read the option first. Why does the air leave the tire? In option A, they are saying the pressure inside the tire is greater than the pressure outside. So obviously, students, A is the correct answer, that the inside pressure is greater than the outside pressure. So that's why the air particles is moving in the outward direction. Like for example, if gas cylinder is leaking, there is a hole in the gas cylinder and it is leaking. So it means that the pressure inside the gas cylinder is greater as compared to outside. What is the reason here? Because the reason is that the area of a cylinder is specified, it is particular. So it means for a smaller area, pressure will be greater. So it means the air will move outside, or the gas will move outside, because the outside pressure is less. So it means the students, A is the correct answer. All right. Now look at the question number 11. Oh yeah, sorry beta, it's paper 2. It's my mistake. I have mentioned paper 6 here. So it is paper 2. Actually, last time we were doing the paper 6. So same thing was running in my mind. Thank you, beta. In question number 11, they are saying which graph shows the relationship between the pressure and volume for a fixed mass of gas at constant temperature. So pressure and volume relation, they are talking about the gas laws. All right. And we know that the students, like for example, this is a container and this container is filled with gas. These are the gas molecules which are moving in the random direction. This is the piston. So right now, this is the pressure, initial pressure of the gas. All right, and this one is the initial volume of the gas. Okay, this is the initial pressure and this one is initial volume. So now student, what I'm doing, I'm applying the force on the piston and the piston is moving in the downward direction without changing the temperature, because they have mentioned here that temperature is constant. So now student, you can see the volume has been decreased. So it means if the volume has been decreased, so the gas molecule is occupying very less area. All right, so it means that they will collide more frequently with each other because the less area is occupied by the gas. So it means the pressure will increase. So it means what we can conclude from this relation, that the pressure and volume are inversely proportional to each other. All right, pressure and volume are inversely proportional to each other. As the pressure is increasing, so volume will decrease. Now, if we will remove the proportionality sign, so we have to use the constant here. So constant is K. All right. So it means the students, you can see in option A, they are saying pressure and volume. Volume is taken on x-axis and pressure is on y-axis, and we are getting the straight increasing line. Straight increasing lines, which is not possible because it is showing a direct relation. In option B, you can see pressure and volume are showing the inverse relation, but you can see that the straight line is showing that there is the inverse relation. Achha, now there is a confusion. The confusion is that in option B, P and V are showing the straight decreasing line, and in option C, you can see they are taking 1 upon V, which is basically the right relation here, versus P. All right, 1 upon V versus P. So basically, which one is the correct answer? It is difficult to identify, B or C. Which one is the correct answer, students? Inaya is saying B. What about other students? Which one is the correct answer? B or C? अच्छा देखिए बेटा, if I talk about this relation that pressure and volume are inversely related with each other, so if I will move the V on the left side, so PV will become constant. So it means at any point I should get the same value. At any point I will get the same value. So it means the student D cannot be a right answer, students. What is the reason? Because we are getting the curved line here, or in curved line the gradient is not constant. So it means the pressure volume relation, we will not get the constant here. So it means D is not our correct answer. Now again we have confusion that B or C, which one is the correct answer. So now you can see option C, when the volume 1 upon V is 0, so pressure is also 0. All right, and you can see, although we are getting the straight increasing line, so student become confused, the teacher, its pressure and volume are increasing. So basically its pressure and volume are not increasing. It's not a V. It is 1 upon V, which is the inverse, which is showing the inverse relation. So it means the student, it is truly satisfying the inverse relation between pressure and volume. So B is not a correct answer. Basically, C is the right answer, because you can see this graph is not complete. All right, everyone, this graph is not complete. If I draw the relation between pressure and volume, so we will get the curve like this, because volume can never be 0. All right, so it means this curve, it will give me the constant, if I will study the inverse relation here, so I will get the constant value. Okay, so now student, which one is the correct answer? C is the right answer. All right, now I'm moving towards the next question, that is question number 12. This question is little bit lengthy. In this question, they are saying the graph shows the internal energy of 1 kg of a metal change with temperature. So first of all, let me tell you that they have given us the internal energy in kilojoule on y-axis and temperature in Celsius on x-axis. Now for 1 kg object, now they are saying what is the increase in the internal energy of a block of the same metal of mass 0.125 kg when its temperature rises from 40 degrees Celsius to 80 degrees Celsius. So basically they are talking about the change in temperature, mass is given. So which thing will come in my mind first? Specific heat capacity. Because if we are using the same metal here, so it means that the specific heat capacity of this object will remain same. So what I will do, students, they have given us the mass of 1 kg object. So first I will find the specific heat capacity of this metal with the help of this graph. What is the formula of specific heat capacity? It is equals to m divided by, sorry, my bad. So specific heat capacity formula is Q divided by M delta T. All right. Q divided by M delta T. Q is the change in energy. Delta T is the change in temperature, and M is the mass for 1 kg. So this graph is plotted for 1 kg mass. So now student, change in energy, you can see the graph, they are saying from 40 degrees Celsius to 80 degrees Celsius for 0.125 kg. So I will use the same temperature here from 40 degrees Celsius to 80 degrees Celsius. Although we will get the same gradient for the constant line, but still I am taking the value 40 degrees Celsius. I can take the value at 0 degrees Celsius or 100 degrees Celsius as well. Because the student for constant straight increasing line, we will get the constant gradient. So at 40 degrees Celsius, we are getting this value or of internal energy, or at 80 degrees Celsius, let me draw the straight line. So we are getting this value of internal energy. So now student, the change in temperature means 80 minus 40. So change in temperature is 40 degrees Celsius. Now we have to find the change in energy here. So now you can see student, there are 5 small boxes between 810 and 815. So one small box is representing the 1 kilojoule of internal energy. 810, 811 and 812. Alright, so 812 is the initial energy and the final energy at 80 degrees Celsius is 824. So what I will do, I will find the change in energy. So 824 minus 812 kilojoule. Kilo means we have to multiply it by 1000. So now student, what we will get after subtraction, let me use my calculator first. So 824 minus 812. So we are getting 12 kilojoule. So 12 kilojoule is the change in energy of this 1 kg mass. So now student, I will put all the values in the given formula. I have mentioned the not given formula, I wrote the formula on my screen. So change in energy is 12 kilojoule. Kilo means we have to multiply it by 1000. All right, mass is given 1 kg and change in temperature is 40 degrees Celsius. All right, so now student, we have to find the specific heat capacity. 12 multiplied by 1000 divided by 40. So what we are getting? We are getting 300. So specific heat capacity of this metal is 300. All right, now students, we have to solve one more step. The next step is we have to find the increase in internal energy for 0.125 kg mass now. So now student, I will again use the same formula I'm writing at the left side of my screen. Alright, I will use the formula of specific heat capacity energy divided by m delta T. So basically we have to find the change in energy now. We have to find the change in energy now. So how we will find Q is equals to mc delta T. So mass is now 0.125. Specific heat capacity is 300 and change in temperature is 40 degrees Celsius. So let me multiply all values so we will get the answer. So 300 multiplied by 40 multiplied by 0.125, we are getting 1500. 1500 exact answer we are getting. So it means students C is the correct answer. This question is little bit challenging. All right, because first we have to calculate the specific heat capacity, because they are using the word same metal. Same metal, it means the both metal will have the same specific heat capacity. All right, students, did you understand this question? All right, now I'm moving towards the next question, that is question number we have done the question number 12. Now I'm moving question number 13. In question number 13, they are saying both melting and boiling water require an input of energy. Obviously, when the ice is melting, so it means it will absorb the energy from the atmosphere. And when the water, it will be converted into the liquid state. And when the water is boiling, so we need to give the energy to the water, so the water will boil. What happened to the temperature of the water during melting and boiling? So let me tell you this thing, students. Whenever the object is melting and boiling, there is no change in temperature. Temperature will remain constant. Because we know that the student, during boiling, energy absorbed by the substance will use this energy to break the bond between the molecules. All right, so it means there is no change in temperature. Like if I draw the graph of heating curve of water, so on x-axis I am taking the time in minutes. On y-axis we are taking the temperature in degrees Celsius. So we will start the graph from this, which is showing that this state is showing the 1 minute. Let's start the graph from this value. it is showing that negative temperature, it means it is in the form of ice. So as the ice will reach the 0 degrees Celsius, so we are getting straight horizontal line, which is showing that the ice is melting and there is no change in temperature. Because during melting, heat energy absorbed by the ice will use to break the bond between the ice molecules. Now, student, as the ice will be completely converted into water, so the water temperature will start to increase until and unless it will reach at 100 degrees Celsius. So at 100 degrees Celsius, the water, at 100 degrees Celsius, the boiling point of water. So again, we will get the straight horizontal line. All right, so it means the students, water is boiling at this point. Okay, so again, the bonds are, force of attraction will become weakest, and then after boiling, water will be converted into the gaseous state. So you can see these are the two transition state, melting and boiling, where there is no change in temperature. So it means the students, which one is the correct answer? You can see in option A, they are saying temperature rises. So temperature will not rise. Temperature does not change during melting. It could be correct, but rises during boiling. So this statement is not correct. So B cannot be a right answer. In option C, temperature rises during melting. No, temperature will not rise. So now we have only one choice. Temperature remains unchanged during melting and boiling. So yes, students, D is the correct answer. All right. Did you understand this question, everyone? Now, question number 14. In question number 14, they are saying a beaker contains a liquid. As the liquid evaporates, particles escape from the surface of the liquid and temperature of the beaker changes. So we know that the student, during the process of evaporation, the remaining liquid will cool down because those particles which are more energetic, they will leave the beaker, they will leave the surface of water and they will escape into the surrounding, leaving behind those molecules which are less energetic, so their temperature is lower. So now they are asking which statement is correct. So in option A, they are saying the beaker cools down because the less energetic particle escape from the surface. No, how less energetic particle can escape from the surface? Obviously, it is not possible. Now in option B, they are saying the beaker cools down because the more energetic particle escape from the surface of the liquid. So yes, students, B is the correct answer because more energetic particle, obviously the particle will have absorbed the heat energy from the surrounding, so they will be more energetic. Okay, now look at the question number 15. In question number 15, they are saying equal volume of water at 100 degrees Celsius are put in 4 containers. So the water temperature is 100 degrees Celsius. You can see it's a matte black side with lid, shiny white side with lid. The containers are left for 2 minutes. Which container of the water has the highest temperature? So remember, beta, 1 minute, Abdul Rafe, that the black object will radiate more energy. It will emit more energy, so the water temperature will decrease rapidly. So A or B cannot be a right answer. So option can be C or D. So C cannot be a right answer because the lid is not here, so the water will become evaporated, so the temperature will decrease. So yes, students, D is the correct answer because the lid, it is covered with the lid, so there is a less chance of evaporation. And the shiny white sides are the poor emitter of radiation, so it will keep the liquid hot for a long time. Did you understand these questions, students? Excellent. All right.